My name is Grace Whitmore. I'm 43 years old. I live in a town you probably wouldn't know unless you've taken a wrong turn off I-70, Waverly, Kansas. One main street, 3 churches, no stoplights, and a diner that still serves pie like it's 1962. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who tells a story like this. You know, the kind where someone dies, sees a light, floats above their body, meets Jesus, and comes back with some dramatic revelation. I used to roll my eyes at those videos on YouTube, but now I know better. Because I died, and what I saw changed everything. It all started on a Wednesday morning that didn't feel any different. I was driving to work. I teach 3rd grade at the elementary school just past the grain elevator. I was thinking about spelling tests and whether I'd remembered to pack my lunch. The sky was a flat gray, the kind that presses on your chest a little. I don't remember the accident. Just the sound, a crunch, like metal tearing through bone. Then silence. But it wasn't really silence. It was the absence of every sound I'd ever known, like being buried under ice. I felt weightless, yet tethered, like something was still holding me down. I opened my eyes, but I wasn't in my car anymore. I wasn't anywhere that made sense. At first, I thought I was dreaming. There was a field, wide and golden, lit from nowhere, with no sun in sight. The grass moved like it was breathing. I stood in the middle of it barefoot, my skin warm but untouched by wind or cold. Then I heard it, a whisper. Not outside me, but through me. You are not alone. I turned, expecting someone, anyone, but the field stretched endlessly in every direction. And still, I felt watched. Not in fear, but in exposure. Like every hidden thing I'd buried inside was suddenly in full view. And then came the pull. Like gravity had reversed. My body, if you could call it that, began to rise, not quickly, but with purpose. The higher I went, the more the field dissolved beneath me into something like memory, like thought. I passed through layers of emotion. Sorrow, longing, regret, joy. They had color somehow. Blue longing, red regret, gold joy. Somewhere in that ascent, I realized I was dead. That should have terrified me. But it didn't. Instead, I thought about my daughter Lily, 12 years old. I hadn't kissed her goodbye that morning. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up worrying instead of praying, about how many times I said, I'll pray for you, but never actually did. And that's when the fear came. Not for me, but for how much I had lived without God, even while pretending I hadn't. And then light. But not a blinding light. It was alive. It knew me. And from the center of it, a figure began to walk forward. He didn't look like the paintings in church. No long hair, no robes. Just presence. Clarity. Peace and power braided into one. I knew him. Not by face. By truth. Jesus. I couldn't speak. My thoughts felt too heavy, too broken. But he smiled, and it was like every crack in my soul was lit from within. He didn't say welcome. He said, "You've been praying with a closed heart." I didn't understand. I wanted to ask what he meant, but I didn't need to. Because the moment I thought the question, he showed me. Scene after scene from my life unfolded around us, like living windows. Me kneeling at church, whispering words while thinking about dinner. Me crying out, "God, why?" during nights of despair, but never waiting for an answer. Me bargaining with him in sickness, in loss, in fear, but never in surrender. My prayers were full of words, but empty of trust. They were contracts, not communion. Then Jesus looked at me, straight into me, and said something I'll never forget. There are 3 words that close the door between you and my Father. You've said them more than you know. I felt the weight of his voice in my bones. But before I could ask which words, I was pulled away, violently, like something was dragging me back through layers of darkness. The light disappeared, the warmth gone, and then ping. I woke up in a hospital bed, my chest aching like fire. A nurse screamed for a doctor. I was choking, gasping, returning. I was alive again. But I had left something behind, and brought something back. The whisper, still echoing in my soul. There are 3 words. The doctor said I flatlined for 4 minutes. They called it a miracle that I came back without brain damage. But they didn't understand. My damage had never been physical. It had been spiritual. And when I woke up in that hospital room, I didn't feel lucky. I felt haunted. The light was gone. The field. The voice. Jesus. But his final words pulsed like a second heartbeat inside me. There are 3 words that close the door between you and my Father. I couldn't stop hearing them. It was like they'd been burned onto my soul. The more I tried to push them away, the louder they echoed. Not in my ears, but in my choices, my memories, my words. Every conversation I replayed in my head, I caught myself saying something careless, thoughtless, empty. I started writing in a notebook. I called it the door. I listed every phrase I had ever used in prayer, every word I spoke when I was desperate, angry, broken. I was searching for something I couldn't name. And then, on the 3rd night, something happened. I was alone in my hospital room. The TV was off. The hall was quiet. I was reading Psalm 34. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. I wanted to believe it, but I felt farther than ever. That's when the lights flickered. Not the building, just the room. A deep cold settled in, like a presence had arrived. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not in the hallway. Not in the room. Inside me. I know how that sounds. I know. But they were real. I closed my eyes and suddenly I wasn't in the hospital anymore. I was back in that field, but it had changed. It was darker now. The grass was dying. The sky cracked with distant thunder, though there was no storm. I looked around, expecting Jesus. But he wasn't there. Instead, a figure stood at the edge of the field. Not evil, not grotesque, but hollow, like a shadow shaped into a man. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his attention. And something in me knew. This wasn't someone sent to me. This was someone called by me. And then I heard it, not spoken aloud, but inside my chest. You still don't understand the words. I tried to speak, but my voice was locked. You pray to avoid pain, not to find truth. You use prayer like a spell, not a surrender. The shadow took a step closer. Do you want to know the words that close heaven? I nodded. He raised his hand, long fingers that shimmered with smoke, and wrote 3 words in the sky above us. But I couldn't read them. Every time I looked, the letters twisted, blurred, rearranged. I could feel the meaning, but not grasp it. It was like trying to hold vapor. And then I realized, these words weren't fixed. They changed shape depending on the speaker's heart. They weren't just words. They were attitudes. The shadow whispered again. You say these words when you pretend to believe. You say them when you lie to yourself. You say them when you pray only to be heard. And then, from behind me, a familiar voice. Grace. I turned. Jesus. Brighter than before. His presence filled the dead field with life again. The shadow fled, dissolved. The grass turned green. The sky cleared. He stepped toward me, his eyes not angry, but grieved. You must return again. But this time speak only with your soul. Only then will you see. I reached for him, but once again, I was pulled away. Back into the cold room. My chest lurched. The monitor beeped. I was awake again. Crying. Shaking. But something had changed. For the first time in my life, I began to pray, without words. No lists. No conditions. No expectations. Just presence. I didn't ask for healing. I didn't demand answers. I simply said, Here I am, Lord. And for the first time, I felt him say, Now we begin. After I left the hospital, the world didn't look the same. People smiled the same way. The sun still rose over the cornfields. The church bells still rang every Sunday. But I had changed. Something in me had been uprooted. I no longer belonged entirely to this world. I couldn't sleep at night. Not from fear, but from thirst. For truth. For him. For that presence that felt more like home than any house I'd ever lived in. I began waking up at 3 a.m. every morning. I didn't set an alarm. I just knew when to rise. I'd go out to the porch, wrap myself in a blanket, and sit in the silence. There's a kind of holy quiet that only exists in the hours before dawn. No words, no noise, just breath, just being. And slowly, something in me opened. Not my mind, my spirit. I started praying differently. I no longer asked for things. I didn't barter, explain, or justify. I just sat in the stillness and said, "Speak, Lord. I'm listening." And one night, he did. It was the seventh night. The wind stopped moving. Even the crickets fell silent. And the moment I closed my eyes, I was taken again. No warning this time, no pain. Just transition. I stood not in the field, but in a place I cannot name. It was neither light nor dark. It simply was. A realm of pure presence. Like standing inside the heartbeat of something eternal. Time didn't exist here. Neither did fear. And then I saw him. Not Jesus as I'd seen him before, but something deeper. The Word made flesh in his pure form. Not a man. Not a figure. But a name, spoken without sound, yet heard in every part of me. He stood at the center of a vast space. And around him, floating in the air like living calligraphy, were words. Endless words. Spoken prayers from across the world. I could see them, some glowing like fire, some dim like ash, some flickering in and out of existence. Then he looked at me. "You want to know the words that closed the door?" I nodded. He raised his hand, and 3 glowing words floated toward me, the same I had seen twisted in the field. But now, they came clear, sharp, and painful. If. Conditional belief. If you love me. If you hear me. It's a word that hands God a contract, not a covenant. Faith cannot live in a cage of conditions, he said. When? Demand of timing. When you fix this. When you answer me. It's prayer dressed as a schedule. Not surrender, control. You ask for me on your clock, but I do not dwell in hours. Why? Accusation disguised as confusion. Why me? Why now? Why this? It seems like a question, but it hides a demand for power. To understand before trusting. To control before believing. Trust is not grown in answers, but in presence. Tears ran down my face, not from shame, but from recognition. I had prayed these words 1,000 times. I had unknowingly built my own prison. I had called it faith, but it was fear. Jesus walked closer, his presence wrapping around me like warmth I hadn't known I'd needed all my life. When you pray, he said, speak not with fear. Speak not with bargain. Speak not with demand. Speak like a daughter to her father. Speak like breath returns to lungs. Speak as if I am already here, because I am. And then he said, there is one word that opens every door. I waited, holding my breath. And he whispered it. Abba. Not just father. Intimate. Close. Child to parent. Not a cry for proof, a cry for presence. Suddenly, I was no longer in the vast place. I was back on my porch. The stars were above me. The blanket around my shoulders. But everything was different now. I didn't just believe. I knew. And I prayed, not with words, not with reasons, just with Abba. And he came. If you're hearing my story, maybe it's not just a story. Maybe you're the reason I came back. Maybe you're the one still praying with if, when, or why. Stop waiting for the right words. Stop bargaining. Just say, Abba, I'm here. Abba, take me back. Abba, I trust you, even when I don't understand. Prayer doesn't save you because of what you say. It saves you because of who you say it to. Return to him. He is already running toward you.